Dreaming of blissful summer days and creamy popsicles? Capture sun-drenched memories with the Orange Vanilla Dream Hydration Multiplier from Liquid IV. Just one stick and 16 ounces of water can help hydrate you better than water alone. Live your summer dream with Liquid IV. Tear, pour, live more. Go to liquidiv.com and get 20% off your first order with code INDULGE20 at checkout.
Alleria Windrunner entered the world bearing the weighty expectations of her lineage. Firstborn to Ranger General Larissa Windrunner and Virith, who is chief advisor to King Anasterion, she was groomed from childhood to inherit the title from her mother, who was the leader of Quel'Thalas' legendary Farstriders. Yet Alleria's spirit ran hotter than elven tradition allowed. She longed for distant horizons, for the culture beyond Eversong's sun-dappled woods, and for renewed friendship with the humans who had once fought beside the High Elves in the Troll Wars. Larissa, unmoved by such wanderlust, she insisted that everything their people needed lay beneath the boughs of the eternal forest. The clash of wills erupted during Alleria's test. She was tasked with killing the most fearsome spring-paw-lengths prowling Eversong named Mauler, but instead found herself pinned beneath its fangs until her younger sister Sylvanas took the killing shot. The rescue saved Alleria's life, but stole her victory. While Sylvanas did rescue Alleria, this test was never about passing or failing. It was more of an evaluation, but Sylvanas didn't know this. The true test was to see how Alleria would act in the face of something truly dangerous. Larissa had all the faith that Alleria would survive the ordeal, and depending on her reaction to the situation, then her mother could train her to improve. Just because Alleria missed the shot didn't mean it was an instant fail. The role of Ranger General isn't one to take lightly, for good reason. Larissa had to show that while Alleria was bound to inherit it, she would also prove that she earned the title, and Sylvanas' interruption only deepened the rift between mother and daughter. Over the following years, Alleria's quiet rebellion grew into open defiance. She stole training hours to mentor sympathetic rangers, and the Farstriders gradually split between Larissa's traditionalists and Alleria's forward-looking group. Later, Alleria shattered expectation entirely. She renounced her claim to Ranger General, nominated the extraordinarily skilled Sylvanas in her stead, saying that Sylvanas was far better with a bow than her, but her mother said that Sylvanas was not good with politics. Alleria announced her intention to roam beyond the kingdom's borders with a hand-picked company. Larissa, wounded yet pragmatic, publicly transferred her mantle to Sylvanas, then placed an heirloom tricolor pendant of emerald, ruby, and sapphire around Alleria's neck as both farewell and blessing. While Alleria explored the wider world, tragedy struck. Orcish assassins cut down Larissa and Virith during a diplomatic mission. Political tumult followed, some Farstriders insisting that the eldest Windrunner must take up the Ranger General mantle, others arguing Alleria had already chosen exile. Returning home, Alleria silenced the debate by pledging absolute loyalty to Sylvanas, securing her sister's uncontested election as Ranger General. In the quiet time that followed their parents' funeral, the three Windrunner sisters gathered in Farstriders' retreat to catch up with what little time they had, but also talk about the news that Sylvanas had learned about the Horde killing their parents. Alleria, on the eve of her departure for Lordaeron, pressed a question that weighed on her heart. Should they tell Lyrith that Orc raiders had murdered their parents? Sylvanas exhaled, gaze fixed on the hearth. One day, yes, but not now. I fear it'll only damage him further, or make him take up arms and try to kill the whole Horde by himself. Alleria's expression tightened. They were his parents, not just ours. He deserves to know, and if he wants to fight, why not train him? Virissa offered soft objection to Sylvanas. He wants to believe he still has a family. Alleria, you are gone now. You walk another path. Sylvanas and I see each other all the time. He is alone in Silvermoon. The word struck Sylvanas like a feathered arrow, silent yet keen. Still, Sylvanas remained resolute. The sisters pledged to honor her wish for secrecy, though Alleria's misgivings lingered. Adjusting her cloak, she tried once more. I still think you should train him. He is smart and dexterous. He will learn quickly now that he's a bit older. Virissa nodded in agreement, but Sylvanas shook her head. No, he has suffered enough. Alleria sighed, fastening her emerald locket. He is an adult, old enough to make his own choices, but train him or not as you will. In the meantime, I will not tell him about the attack. It should come from you, Sylvanas. Consider it, and think on training him too." With that, she strode out, bound first for an audience with King Anasterion, then for a brief visit to the artist quarter to visit Lyrith before journeying south. The royal audience proved bittersweet. Alleria argued passionately that the Horde posed a mortal danger, worthy of a full muster. With the king being assured by distant reports and still nursing Quel'Thalas' policy of measured isolation, he did not agree with Alleria. Only a token detachment would ride to Lordaeron's aid, far fewer than the numbers Alleria had hoped to see. As she left the spired palace, the weight of impending war pressed harder than ever on her shoulders. Sometime after the Alliance's counteroffensive began, Alleria rode with Turalyon and Khadgar, destroying Orcish camps and severing supply lines until the Horde staggered back in angry retreat. Mid-campaign, a breathless messenger arrived. The woodlands fringing Quel'Thalas were burning. Rage eclipsed caution, and Alleria demanded a forced march north. Turalyon counseled restraint, warning that even her skill could be drowned beneath sheer numbers. She relented, barely, insisting he push the column harder and promising to surge ahead once the forest was in sight. When Eversong's tree line finally appeared, Alleria broke ranks and sprinted for home, arriving as Sylvanas, Lor'themar, and Haldoran battled at Silvermoon's gates. In that smoke-stained dusk, Sylvanas pressed their mother's bow Thas-Dara into Alleria's hands, certain her elder sister would loose vengeance where it burned hottest. Moments later, Alleria lifted the bow overhead, signaling a retreat. Sylvanas' confusion ended when a crimson dragon swept low, its breath igniting the canopy and scattering both armies. After the Inferno's first roar, the sisters found a fleeting moment together. Sylvanas embraced Alleria. Verisa hugged her and lingered. Alleria promised to pursue the fleeing orcs while her sister secured the city, then sprinted after a detachment slipping into the Whispering Woods, too distant to hear the cry that followed. When the smoke cleared, Sylvanas stood over Lyrith, an axe lodged between his shoulders. The churned earth and empty bow revealed he had fought like a Farstrider, but half-top parries could not defeat veteran killers. At his grave, Verisa, Sylvanas, and a small group of friends who knew Lyrith gathered. Alleria was unable to make it back due to having to rush to Lordaeron to help them fight the Horde. Shortly after laying their brother to rest, Sylvanas' composure shattered. "You knew I feared for him. You knew how badly I wanted. I needed him to be safe." Verisa answered with studied calm. "I don't think I did. I don't think you let others see how deeply you cared. I wanted him to be safe too, in his heart as well as in body. You didn't see him light up when he began to improve." Grief drove Sylvanas away, and Verisa left Sylvanas alone as she requested. Alleria and Lor'themar marched with Turalyon to lift the Horde's siege of Capital City, forcing the orcs into a panicked southern flight. Victory tasted of ash. 18 Windrunner kin lay among the dead, Lyrith foremost in Alleria's thoughts. She found brief solace in Turalyon's embrace, love that would soon give them a son, Eretor. But her mourning crystallized into purpose. With bow strung and eyes blazing, she vowed that each arrow she released would fly in her brother's name until the Horde's banners lay in ruin. Grief had tempered Alleria into something harder than steel. To the quiet horror of those who still loved her, she began to regard the scattered Orcish warbands as vermin, creatures to be hunted down and wiped out for the good of the world. With a hand-picked group of Farstriders, she patrolled the border villages of northern Lordaeron, stalking the Bleeding Hollow stragglers left behind when the Second War collapsed. The Horde would bleed for each note of music Lyrith would never play again. 2 winter cycles after the war, a summons from Nethergard Keep came. Archmage Khadgar reportedly unthinkable. The Dark Portal's wound was widening, and Azeroth would soon bleed again. Alleria, infant son Eretor cradled against her breast, rode south to warn High General Turalyon. Revenge still burned, yet she knew this fight would dwarf mere score settling. When Ner'zhul's horde surged anew, Alleria answered without hesitation. She left Eretor in Verisa's care, smelted her tricolor heirloom into separate gems, and had Verisa be her emissary. An emerald for herself, a ruby for Verisa, a sapphire for Sylvanas, and marched through the Dark Portal as a captain of the Alliance expedition. Draenor's red skies and shattered mesas mirrored the turmoil inside her. There, amid running battles and desperate sieges, she discovered a purpose larger than hate. defending comrades and safeguarding worlds yet untouched by war. The moment of clarity came when Turallion, battered but unbroken, ordered her to remain behind while he led a charge. Alleria could not sentence the man she loved to a lonely death. She fought at his side, grief finally giving way to mourning, mourning opening the door to love. Together they helped Khadgar seal the last escape back to Azeroth. And when Draenor tore itself apart in a cataclysm of fire, Alleria and her surviving allies stepped into the twisting nether, choosing sacrifice over surrender. Stormwind later raised statues in their honor, believing them lost beyond the stars. Yet, on a memory-soft winter's day, Alleria's spirit drifted to the royal courtyard, where toddler Eretor swung a wooden sword at imaginary foes, and struck stone instead. Another mother might have smiled at such martial enthusiasm. Alleria's heart only ached. "War is no game, my son," she whispered to a wind he could not hear. "Remember that, when I cannot be there to remind you." The cataclysm that tore Draenor apart hurled Alleria and Turallion into a borderland where reality frayed. The scarlet skies of a dying world bleeding into the star-shot void of the twisting nether. There, amid floating mountains and rivers of molten crystal, they were discovered by Lothroxian, a dreadlord remade in holy flame who now served the army of the light. He spoke of prophecy and purpose, of two mortals destined to turn the Legion's endless war toward its final chapter. His arrival was timely. The Legion had sent a shadow blade to silence that destiny, and Alleria's arrows ended the would-be assassin before its fell blade left its sheath. Even her victory could not dim the sudden blaze of radiance that followed. The Naru Zira manifested as a constellation of living light, proclaiming that the burning Legion, thwarted at the Second War, was gathering strength for a new assault on Azeroth. Alleria's first thought was of Eretor, and the fractured kingdoms that would stand defenseless. She pleaded for passage home, but Zira insisted their path lay elsewhere. The quote-unquote Emerald Star waited in distant reaches, holding the secret to end Sargeras' crusade forever. Reluctant yet resolute, Alleria and Turallion accepted, stepping through a gateway to the flagship Zenidar and into the ranks of the Army of the Light. Aboard the dimensional warship, years stretched into decades unmarked. Under Zira's guidance, Turallion became a beacon, his mortal flesh suffused with light until time itself bent around him. Alleria, whose spirit still danced on the knife edge between grief and hope, honed her bow work against demonic battalions and studied the swirling currents of the nether that might one day be turned against the Legion. One quiet vigil beside the observation crystals granted her a glimpse of home, a memorial in Stormwind's Valley of Heroes, where snow dusted the silent statues. There at the base stood Sylvanas in dark regalia, and a bright-eyed child pretending a wooden sword was a hero's glaive, Eretor. Alleria poured every heartbeat of pride and longing into the light and sent it spiraling across the cosmos. Far below, the boy paused mid-swing, eyes shining as if some invisible hand had brushed his cheek. He smiled up at the statue of his mother and reached out, bridging for an instant the gulf of worlds with pure, wordless love. In the decades that followed, the Zenidar struck at every Legion camp it could reach. On one such assault, the Army of the Light breached a remote prison planet, only to find its guardians unnaturally, permanently dead. An oily hush clung to the corridors, the work of the void. While searching for captives, Alleria was ambushed by a wraith woven from that same nothingness. She slew it, but its essence seared itself into her spirit, flooding her mind with visions. Rather than recoil, she leaned closer to the abyss, hungry to understand this weapon the Legion could not command. Lothroxian, wary but loyal, shared what lore he possessed. Rumors of a wayfarer in shadows, a locust walker, who navigated the void without surrendering to it. Alleria carried the name to Zira, proposing that harnessing such power might tip the scales against the Legion. The Naru's reply was a blinding refusal. Obedient in word but not in heart, Alleria filed the memory away like an arrowhead for a battle yet to come. Time warped strangely in the twisting nether. 20 years on Azeroth stretched into 5 centuries of relentless skirmishes for those aboard the Zenidar. Then the Legion descended upon the shattered remains of Draenor, now Outland, and Alleria's visions blazed anew. She saw herself walking the fell-scarred surface of Argus, the Emerald Star burning at its core. Sensing opportunity, Zira dispatched Alleria and Turallion to infiltrate the demon homeworld while its war machine focused elsewhere. En route, Alleria confessed. The visions guiding her were not gifts of the light, but of another, darker current. Trallian's faith did not falter. "I trust you more than any prophecy," he said, clasping her hand over the humming sigils of the transport deck. Upon landing, they prowled Argus's ruinous plains until the world soul itself reached out to Alleria, showing her that this star was no artifact, but the Titan heart whose agony resurrected the Legion's armies. Trallian, though he saw nothing, vowed aloud to set the spirit free. Their declaration drew a swarm of demons. Light met fell in crackling arcs, yet numbers pressed the pair toward defeat, until Alleria opened herself to the void. Shadows surged through her arrows, shredding the fiends and tearing a rift in space. Trallian screamed as the darkness licked his light-infused flesh, but she seized him and hauled them both through to a lonely isle adrift in the nether. Their fingers blistered where light touched void. "I am not your enemy," she pleaded, eyes swirling with starless night. She begged him to return to the Zenidar while she traced the new path unfolding before her. Tears silvered his cheek as she vanished into another umbral gateway, chasing whispers only she could hear. That gateway emptied Alleria onto the scorched surface of Niskara, a Legion stronghold where prisoners were broken for sport. Fell chains snapped around her before she could breathe, and she awoke in a stifling cell opposite the very shadow sage she had sought, the Locust Walker. His ritual bindings had been torn away by his captors, leaving a lattice of violet fire flickering across an incorporeal form. The demons believed they had caged two prizes. Instead, they had locked themselves in with the void. An Inquisitor arrived to peel secrets from flesh, but Alleria turned the torturer's fear against him, using the void to set herself free. Recalling the Locust Walker's whispered teachings, she threaded an arrow with silence and shadow, slaying the demon and shattering the cell wards. Letting out a laugh, the Locust Walker wove a rift into raw oblivion, and together they stepped beyond reality's lip. Nothingness surrounded them. No air, no sound, only the heartbeat rush of potential. Here the first true lesson began: balance madness with will or be devoured. As they drifted through the darkness, with the only light being from the Locust Walker himself, he rifled through her memories. Parents lost to Horde axes, Lyrath's smile, Erator's distant laughter, and spoke of the duet between light and shadow. The light, he said, sees a single shining road and calls all others lies. The void sees every road at once and calls each of them truth. Between those absolute lies is the sliver where freedom grows. In that sliver, Alleria witnessed fates unseen by either force, destinies branching like silver roots through time. Yet destiny tugged too soon. A vision lanced her thoughts. Trallian, grappled by an Eridar soul thief, his light snuffed heartbeat by heartbeat. Alleria demanded release. When the Locust Walker refused, lesson unfinished, she let loose a void-charged shot that cracked the darkness between them. He labeled her a coward, saying he should have expected no less from a mortal. But before he was about to strike, he changed his mind, telling her she has a unique destiny ahead of her. With that, she left to save him. Alleria burst onto a shattered terrace just as the Eridar drove its soulstone into Trallian's chest. Shadow answered her fury. She splintered the gem, flayed the demon, and wrenched the fell poison from Lothroxian's veins so the Lightforged Dreadlord could restore Trallian's soul. But while Lothroxian saved Trallian, Alleria had unfinished business with the demon who caused this to her love. The demon made one mistake that made Alleria sure he would not see another day. He threatened Erator. The demon tried everything he could to get away, but it was no use. Alleria used the void to stab him repeatedly as he tried to escape, throwing blades at her to hopefully end her. But it was no use. They stopped midair before even touching her. She formed the void into spikes and stabbed through his shoulders so his arms were useless. Being held by the void, he continued to plead for his life. But all hope died for any mercy when she knelt in front of him and looked into his eyes as she said, "You promised to kill my son." With that final sentence, she took her dagger and sliced his throat, ending him for good. When the last echo of battle faded, Trallian urged her to flee. Zira would never face void-touched hands. Alleria stood her ground. Zira descended in a blaze of adamant radiance. Trallian and Lothroxian pleaded for clemency. The Naru offered it, on the condition that Alleria renounce the void. She lifted her chain, eyes a storm of stars, and refused. With that, Zira put her in a cell on the ship until she agreed to her conditions. Regardless of her circumstance, she promised Turalian she would be back, as Zira had her led away. Whispers of her shadow trailed through the war for alternate Draenor. Adventurers garrisoned in the wild frontier spoke of a cowled ranger who slipped into the inn at twilight. Silver eyes watchful beneath a hood stitched in Farstrider green. She asked for no payment, except for discretion, and tasked any willing soul with retrieving relics of high elven make. One such artifact, a quiver of silver-lined arrows, lay buried deep within the void-soaked crypts of Shadowmoon burial grounds. When at last the arrows were placed in her gloved hands, the stranger confided a sliver of truth. She searched for Alleria Windrunner, and had dared hope the twisting nether's mysterious tides might have swept the lost ranger into this fractured timeline. Whether the arrows truly belonged to Alleria remained unanswered, but their presence amid burial urns pulsing with void suggested a fateful symmetry, an early omen that the Windrunner who walked between light and shadow would soon stride back into history. Years of divination and dust-choked scouting turned up little more than legend, until a Felguard, flayed to the brink by Farstrider interrogators, croaked a single clue: Niskara. The demons swore that inquisitors there tormented a void-kissed ranger, whose bow blazed like captured dawn. Alleria Windrunner snatched at the lead, assembling a strike team of Farstrider veterans and unseen path rangers. If the Legion truly held her sister, they would pry her free, or at the very least keep Thas'Dara out of fiendish hands. The raid cut through wards and warlocks alike. Deep within a reliquary of soul-forged iron, they found Thas'Dara poised atop a pedestal of black glass.
Thas'Dara began as my family's legacy, but now this weapon has a greater purpose. This is a bow worthy of a hero like Alleria, a hero like you. Take Thas'Dara, champion. Use it to lead the fight to save Azeroth.
Thas'Dara's rescue sparked new conviction. Alleria had survived Draenor's cataclysm, and now hunted the Legion in the darkest reaches of the twisting nether. That fragile hope crystallized when Lothroxian revealed his commanders. A knight of golden fire named Turalian, and beside him, the bowless yet unbowed Alleria Windrunner. The trail at last pointed beyond the firmament, toward a reunion written among the stars. Argus greeted the Skyfire fleet with a storm of fel-infused artillery. The lightship Zenidar shuddered under a direct hit, spiraling toward the scorched horizon while Alleria, still caged in luminous shackles, vanished amid buckling decks and shrieking alarms. Turalian refused to accept the blast as her end. Sure enough, she emerged hours later beside an Azerothian champion, arrows of void slicing through where the light could not pierce. Aboard the Draenei flagship Vindicar, mother and son finally stood eye to eye. Erator's hands trembled as they traced the familiar curve of his mother's cheek, and Alleria swore that every impossible choice she and Turalian had made had been to protect this moment. Never again, she whispered, knotting their fingers together. No war will sever us a second time. Joy soon tangled with unease. Varisa brought word that their middle sister now wore the Horde's mantle of Warchief. Alleria balked. After all the Horde had done to Quel'Thalas, such a notion felt like sacrilege. Varisa, uncertain whether to reveal Sylvanas' undeath amid the bustle of the war room, promised a private conversation later. She later recounted the Huntmaster's daring raid on Niskara and the retrieval of Thas'Dara. When Alleria finally met the ranger who bore her mother's bow, she bowed in gratitude. "Your courage keeps our legacy bright," she said. "One day I may reclaim Thas'Dara, but until then, let its song guide your arrows." Soon after, Zira's shattered core called for retrieval from the wreckage of the Zenidar. The prospect of returning to his cell with Zira's revival gave Alleria pause, yet she joined Turalian in prying the Naru's crystalline shards free. Zira tried to infuse Illidan with the light and cleanse him of his scars and be reborn, but Illidan refused and proclaimed, "I am my scars," before breaking free of Zira's hold and blasting her with his fel beams, breaking Zira apart and the pieces falling to the floor, killing the Naru. Turalian's blade flashed in outrage, going to strike down Illidan before his attack was blocked by Illidan himself. Alleria held her ground, eyes wide, not with fury but with awe, and a flicker of wary respect. That Illidan could snuff out a prime Naru's light. Illidan proclaimed while holding Turalian's sword with one arm, that we do not need a chosen one, we must save ourselves. Before the next battle horn could sound, an unexpected calm settled over the Vindicar. Khadgar's shimmer-cloaked griffin docked at the front of the ship. Over mugs of steam-sweetened kaffa, the Archmage relayed joyous news. Danath Trollbane still swung his sword with undiminished fury, and Curdran Wildhammer remained every bit as loud as his griffin's screech. When the war was ashes, the sons of Lothar would gather for a Wintervale feast, Khadgar insisted. Alleria laughed and reminded him it was his turn to pay the tab. He groaned but agreed with theatrical despair. Duty soon eclipsed nostalgia. Reports from Velen spoke of the Crest of Knowledge, one shard of the ancient crown that once ruled Argus, hidden within the shadow-drowned halls of the Seat of the Triumvirate. Alleria had scouted the ruins already and sent Lura, pulsing like a dark star that lured the ethereal Shadowguard to siphon her void-laden essence. She and an Azerothian champion dropped into Eridath's broken avenues, where Krokul captives twist and turn beneath forced void infusion, while the priest Archon fought to keep their spirits intact. Amid the chaos strode the Locust Walker, cloak swirling with galaxies. He disclosed his purpose, to unravel whatever scheme the Shadowguard plotted for Argus. The Ethereals, terrified that their plans would falter under his scrutiny, sought to cage him and Alleria. He queried her calmly, almost playfully. How would she wield shadow when the light flared so fiercely at her side? Alleria answered with a bowstring's hum. Light and shadow define each other. To deny one is to blind the other. Together they carved a path toward Lura's dark beacon, each step balancing on the razor-thin line where destinies converge. Shadowguard bulwarks crumbled beneath their assault, but the Locust Walker claimed a real trial lay ahead. In the twilight ruin beneath Eridath's spires, he lured out Nalathoth, a revenant of pure abyssal hunger. Together they struck it down, and from the black glass ribs he wrenched a pulsing heart of void fire. Claim it, he urged. Alleria pressed the seething core to her breast and felt the cosmos tilt. Visions roared, stars dying, stars reborn, yet her mind held. The Locust Walker nodded, satisfied. As long as her will remained unbroken, the void would answer to her, not the reverse. One day, he promised, he would share how he forged chains for his own shadows. Their hunt carried them into the Seat of the Triumvirate, where Lura, once a beacon of light, now birthed rifts of seething darkness. With the ethereals closing in, the Locust Walker challenged Alleria to sip from those rifts, to bend the storm rather than drown in it. Arrow after arrow drank shadow until, in a thunderous sound, she drew Lura's essence into herself and blazed forth as a living silhouette of void. Know your limits, her mentor whispered as they slipped away, then break them deliberately. Later, aboard the Vindicar, Alleria demonstrated the change, void form blooming and fading at her command. She was the fulcrum now, pivoting between night and dawn. When news reached them that the Pantheon had bound Sargeras within the Seat of the Pantheon, hope flared brighter than any star Alleria had traversed. She yearned for the emerald canopies of Quel'Thalas, for heart smoke and the laughter of kin. Yet one reunion weighed heavy, Sylvanas. Was the war chief still her sister, or a light-forsaken revenant wearing a familiar face? Alleria's own metamorphosis would raise its own suspicions. She breathed deeply, steadying her twin tides of light and shadow. Whatever awaited, she would meet it head-on. Bow in hand, family at her side, and destiny balanced on a razor of her own making. Stormwind welcomed them with banners snapping in the harbor wind. Yet beneath the towering statues that bore their likeness, Alleria felt uneasily ghost-like. Twice, she murmured. Fate had tried to write her epitaph. First in Draenor's fiery death throes, then when she consumed Lura's unraveling light. Was a Windrunner destined always to die before her story could finish? Turalyon heard the fracture in her voice. He also saw the tension she tried to hide. The dread-laced eagerness to confront the sister who now ruled the Horde. Nothing forces this meeting, he reminded her. Not tonight, not ever. Alleria's jaw tightened. Everything forces it. Quel'Thalas is my blood. I will meet Sylvanas on our own soil, and ask how she dares bear the mantle of War Chief. Turalyon suggested briefing King Anduin. The encounter would take place on Horde soil after all, but Alleria shook her head. This is no council summit, it is family, and family affairs do not require crowns or thrones. She glanced up at her stone effigy and felt the weight of expectations settle like dew on armor. Whatever legacy awaited the Windrunners, she would claim it on her own terms. Then a rift of swirling onyx yawned open, and she stepped through. She emerged amid Eversong's eternal spring, where Varisa was waiting for her. "Hello again, little moon," Alleria said, calling her by the nickname she had been given when they were kids, and Varisa replied, "With such golden hair, you had to be Lady Sun." Alleria admitted the title felt ill-fitting now that shadow sang in her veins. Yet she swore her heart remained her own. Dark whispers coiled, insisting the Sunstrider throne was hers for the taking, and that Varisa could be a vessel for the void. Instead of yielding, Alleria listened to her sister's tales, the rise of Garrosh, Ronan's sacrifice, and a fleeting moment where vengeance almost bound Varisa to Sylvanas before conscience prevailed. The place they spent so many afternoons together, where Lyrith would play for them and the three sisters would dance with each other. Nostalgia for carefree dances with Lyrith welled up, until a cold hand clasped Alleria's. Sylvanas stood at the forest's edge, eyes like winter moons, skin the color of grave ash. The void shrieked warnings, danger, corruption, strike first. Alleria steadied her breath, tightened her grip, and greeted the Banshee Queen. "Hello then, Lady Moon," hoping the spark of that old harmony had not yet dwindled. Alleria commented that these lands were not so greatly changed, but Sylvanas told her, "You lack vision. Everything changes if you walk far enough. Come." Leaving the golden boughs of Eversong behind, the sisters crossed into the Ghostlands, where the forest song had long since curdled into mournful wind through shattered branches. She recounted Arthas's march of destruction, frost, flame, and the sundering of every ward the High Elves had trusted. Alleria listened in silence. After fighting their way into the Ghostlands to the creatures left behind by Arthas's destructive path, Sylvanas whistled, and skeletal horses ran toward the sisters. To pass the grim miles, they revived an old campfire game, One is a Lie. Each sister offered 3 statements, one false. Alleria went first. "First, I've missed you both terribly. Second, the powers of the void are a tremendous gift. And I have no regrets about stepping through the dark portal so many years ago." She finished as undead erupted from the roadside and were felled mid-sentence. Varisa was next. "First, I believe in the Blood Elves. I think they can be redeemed. Second, I have finally made my peace with the loss of my beloved Ronan. And last, I fear I will lose you both, forever." Sylvanas lists her statements. "First, there are times I wish I was still alive. Second, I am proud to be the war chief of the Horde. My last, I will never betray you, my sisters." Near the husk of Golden Mist Village, phantom villagers materialized, translucent echoes of friends and tutors long dead. Instead of dragging on the fight longer than needed, the sisters made quick work of the spirits around them. But after the first fight finished, Alleria flung an accusation saying Sylvanas had tried to twist Varisa into an assassin, aiming Ronan's widow at Garrosh Hellscream. Sylvanas answered in a snarl. "Is that what Little Moon told you? Tell her whose plan it was in the first place, Varisa. Who convinced whom? Who added the poison to Hellscream's food? And who abandoned me?" The spirits were not done. With her fury ignited, Sylvanas released her banshee scream, shredding a shade into ribbons of blue light. Revulsion and the void's eager chorus surged through Alleria. Shadow flared around her, molding her once more into a living silhouette of night. "The sister I loved is gone," she declared, while unseen voices urged her to make the judgment final. Sylvanas countered, "I had no choice regarding my fate, but you, sister? You left your son, you left our brother, you left us, and now you return, a mere vessel for the void's power. You are but a shadow of Alleria, an abomination." With tempers flaring, Varisa spoke up, taking up her role as peacekeeper, as she had in the family so many years ago when they were growing up. "Neither of you were there when I needed you. You both let me think you were dead. Do you know what that did to me? You were my heroes. We have all lost so much. Must we lose everything? Again?" She said, hoping to talk some sense into her sisters. After making their way to their old home in the spire and cleansing it, they each revealed their lie. Varisa was first, saying, "It is true that I believe the Cinderai will one day reflect on their actions and rejoin the Alliance. and I do fear losing you both. The lie is that I have moved past Ronan's death. I see him every day in my sons." Alleria offered hers. She did miss her sisters. She felt no regret for the centuries spent beyond Azeroth. And her lie? She considered the void a gift. In truth, it was a battle every day, but one she would win. When Alleria turned to Sylvanas, the Banshee Queen folded her arms, refusing to bear any hidden cards. "Keep your secrets then," Alleria sighed, sadness tempering anger. "I fought for 1,000 years believing my family would still be here when I returned. But my family is broken. Here, and in Stormwind," she says, removing her necklace and leaving it behind at their former home, saying that she knows Lyrith would have wanted them to try. Before leaving, Verisa called back to Sylvanas. "I wanted to tell you that I was a coward. You asked me to stay with you, I said yes, and then all I did was send you a letter to refuse. That must have hurt you. Whatever has passed between us and whatever will, I am sorry. I hope one day you can forgive me." Sylvanas didn't turn around to face her sister as they both walked away into the portal. Verisa stepped through with a last, hopeful glance at Sylvanas. Alleria followed, the portal snapping shut like a heart clenched around grief. Moments later, she was back in Stormwind's starlit corridors, drawing Eretor and Turallion into her arms, anchor points against the gathering dark. Not long after, the call came from Stormwind Keep. High King Anduin Wrynn convened his inner council in the war room, where candles flickered over banners of every Alliance realm. Fresh grief lined his face. His faithful butler Will Benton had died. Anduin unveiled a daring proposal, a formal gathering that would allow Forsaken to meet the living kin they left behind. Alleria and Turallion stood among the advisors. When the floor opened for council, Alleria recounted her own fraught reunion in the Ghostlands, how love and memory had collided with undeath and shadow, until only heartbreak remained. She doubted the decaying mind of the Forsaken could tell friend from foe once emotion ran hot. "Do not wager on my sister's mercy," she added, voice low but hard as drawn steel. Sylvanas has walked the dark too long. Whatever light lingered in her was devoured long ago. Her warning hung over the map table like a thundercloud. Though Anduin's resolve did not waver, he nodded, absorbing the caution. The future of the gathering, it seemed, would depend on faith balanced against the counsel of those who had learned, painfully, that not every bridge can bear the weight of the past. The aborted gathering plunged relations into deeper frost, yet Alleria refused to cede her homeland to history. When Anduin declared that fresh allies were essential against the resurgent Horde, she set her sights on Silvermoon, believing the Blood Elves could be coaxed back beneath the Alliance banner. Crossing the fractured, scourged scar of the Ghostlands, she arrived at the royal court, just as First Arcanist Tharistra of Suramar made her own overture of friendship. Lorthamar Theron, once her Farstrider comrade and now Regent Lord, welcomed her as a legend of bygone battles. Pleasantries were exchanged with Lady Liandrin and the Nightborn envoy. Yet when Alleria laid out her proposal, Lorthamar's answer was a polite but ironclad refusal. Before departing, she requested one boon, to see the Sunwell. A millennium had passed by her reckoning since she last gazed upon its light. Grand Magister Romoth didn't think she should be allowed near the Sunwell, citing her bond to the Void, but Lorthamar overruled him. Stepping onto the Sunwell plateau, she sensed the Sunwell's radiant arcane light had changed, laced with an unfamiliar humming resonance she couldn't quite name. The void within her answered that call, and horrors clawed into reality through her own shadow. Twisted echoes hungry for the well's power. Guardians and guests leapt to defend the sacred waters, arrowheads blazing with starlit darkness, until the last aberration was cast back beyond the veil. In the aftermath, Romoth moved to clap her in chains for sabotage. Lorthamar stayed the order but pronounced banishment. Her presence, however unintended the calamity, was a danger Quel'Thalas could not risk. Though stung, Alleria's keen ears caught a whispered rumor. Others like her, Blood Elves exiled for dabbling in shadow, wandered the margins of the kingdom. She returned to Stormwind to brief Anduin on the failed negotiations, then turned on her heel and headed north again. If Silvermoon would not stand with the Alliance, perhaps its outcasts, the void-touched elves shunned by their own, could. And if she could save them from the whispers that stalked her every waking moment, They might yet forge a new kind of kinship in the wars to come. Following the whispered trail of Magister Umbric, a scholar cast out for courting shadow, Alleria threaded through the Ghostland's silent towers, piecing together arcane echoes he had left behind. Echoes of the past played in fractured light, revealing his clash with Romoth, his fascination with a void-scarred world, and his promise of an artifact that could tame or unmake minds. Each clue pointed to Dawnstar Spire, where a final illusion flared and outlined a rift torn through reality. Alleria took in the rift's chill, and stepped onto broken asteroids adrift in velvet night. There she found Umbric and his fellow exiles, drawn thin by their experiments yet exhilarated to meet the legendary ranger who had mastered the same darkness that now lapped at their hearts. Umbric led her to the crystalline shard they had unearthed, power enough to drown sanity. Before his ritual could unlock it, Nether Prince Durzan materialized, the very ethereal who had tried to twist the Sunwell. Durzan bound the elves in chains of whispering shadow and began stripping their mortality, shaping perfect servants of the void. Alleria's arrows answered first, as Durzan poured promises and threats into her mind. She countered with defiance, urging the exiles to anchor themselves in memory, sunlit battlements, the scent of Eversong blooms. Side by side with an alliance champion, she shattered the prince's core and scattered his essence to the abyss. The ritual backlashed, transforming Umbric's followers but leaving their wills intact. Kneeling amid the stardust, Umbric thanked Alleria for hauling them back from madness. She offered a pact. She would teach them to command the void instead of serving it. In return, they would pledge blades and spellfire to the Alliance. Silvermoon had turned its back on them. Now they would carve a future as void elves under Alleria's banner. Returning to Stormwind, Alleria presented King Anduin with fresh allies and a new base, Telegraph's Rift, a fortress of shadow-lit crystals where the Locust Walker himself soon arrived to help hone the fledgling order. Hope gleamed in Anduin's eyes, proof that even exile could be reforged into strength when guided by will rather than fear. When the sky above Lordaeron cracked with violet lightning, it was Alleria who strode through the first rift. Void portals blossomed across the battlefield, releasing forces of void elves and gnomes under command of Alleria and High Tinker Mekatork respectively. Amid the chaos, Alleria's arrows sought a single target, Nathanos Blightcaller, dueling him through drifting plague fog until retreat was his only escape. At the throne room gates, she and Anduin cornered Sylvanas, and a jagged regret flickered behind Alleria's eyes. She should have killed Sylvanas. In the uneasy lull that followed, the Wind's Redemption anchored at Paralysis became her command deck. Alleria praised Halford Wormbane's adaptability, rare praise from her Windrunner. And when debate flared between Wormbane and Chandra's Feathermoon over striking Jaster Gallywix or Blood Prince Dreven, she offered a solution. Magister Umbric and the Void Elves would hunt the Goblin, freeing Chandra's to stalk the Prince of the Night. Weeks later, as Anduin welcomed the Admiralty of Quel'Thalas beneath the Alliance banner, Alleria stood beside Turalyon on the deck of the Quel'Thalan flagship. Sea spray caught in her hair while cathedral bells pealed across Stormwind Harbor, and she allowed herself a rare smile. Every new ally, every reclaimed kingdom, was another thread binding a fractured world together, and a step closer to the reckoning still owed between sisters. Tensions soon shifted south to the red dust of Durotar. Varrock Sourfang's revolutionaries and Anduin's vanguard assembled at Razor Hill, half a league from Orgrimmar's iron gates. As battle plans took shape, Alleria and Varisa arrived in a swirl of dark feathers. The hairs of Alleria's arm prickled, the unmistakable shiver that meant an old god had slipped its chains. She argued that Sylvanas now commanded the only host ruthless enough to challenge N'Zoth, and that perhaps they should let her march unchecked. Anduin's reply was ice over steel. Sylvanas had already sacrificed both fleets to Ajara's abyss. One war at a time, the Banshee Queen had to fall before Azeroth could face another horror. Alleria relented, agreeing to scout the perimeter for flaws Sylvanas might have missed. At dawn, Sourfang strode alone toward the gates and called Mat-Gara. Alleria watched from a rocky rise as two titans of the Horde traded words sharper than any axe. During the fight, Sourfang was able to get Sylvanas to say her true feelings about the Horde, declaring the Horde worthless. Following that, she released a lethal arrow of shadow and storm, cleaving the Old Orc's chest and shattering her own claim to Warchief in the same breath. With Sylvanas gone and her loyalists stunned into shame, the rebellion and the standing Horde clasped forearms. Unity forged in Sourfang's blood. There was no longer a fortress to storm, only ashes to honor. Alleria slung her bow, nodded to Anduin, and led the Alliance contingent back across the Barrens. Another battle averted, another reckoning delayed. Within the horrific vision of Stormwind, which is an echo of futures that might yet be, champions glimpsed a version of Alleria wholly claimed by the Void. Her form wreathed in shadow tendrils as she turned defenders into living night. The image clung like frost to iron, a stark reminder of the razor's edge she walked every dawn. After N'Zoth was chained within his own abyss, Alleria returned to the Valley of Heroes. She stood beneath the statue carved in her honor, musing aloud about simpler days when duty was clearer. Turalyon found her there, his light-forged armor catching sunset gold. She spoke of an ache. The war had ended without both of her sisters at her side, and the silence left by the old god was already filling with new, hungering whispers. Yet sorrow soon sharpened into resolve. Sylvanas will answer for every scar she's carved across kin and kingdom, she promised. Turalyon clasped her hand, light meeting shadow, and together they turned toward Stormwind Keep, ready to face the next song destiny chose to sing. King Anduin set Alleria and Turalyon on an urgent mission to find Sylvanas. Each fruitless report frayed the king's patience. Yet it was Alleria who suffered the worst torment. One night, a vision seized her. Sylvanas smothering her with death magic, then cutting down Turalyon and their son Eretor. Snapping awake, she admitted to Turalyon that she had peered into 1,000 futures, each darker than the last, and swore to rise above her own worst self to thwart her sister's designs. Their first real lead came when Danath Trollbane relayed rumors of a Dark Ranger hiding among Horde refugees in the Arathi Highlands. Alleria and Turalyon encircled the little camp, and the roundup was done without incident until Zun, an orc boy, lunged at them. Turalyon expertly pinned the child, but spared him when the boy's mother Gauzes begged for mercy. The sight stirred a memory in Alleria of Eretor racing across Stormwind's courtyard, and she knelt beside the boy to tell him that war offers no true glory, only a chance to choose compassion when the world shows its ugliest face. Their quarry, however, was absent. The Void whispered that the boy's mother held the answers, yet an hour of Turalyon's gentle questioning yielded nothing. Reluctantly, Alleria let the shadows unfurl with her admitting she felt no pleasure in torturing civilians. But she had to find her sister, and desperate times called for this desperate measure. Void tendrils sifted through the orc's memories until Apothecary Cotley, horrified, blurted out the secret she had sworn to keep. The Dark Ranger Vizrin was bound for Falder's Cove to secure a ship. Instantly, Alleria released the captive and ordered Captain Nightgiver to provide the refugees with food and blankets, then escort Cotley to Stormwind for further questioning. As she turned away, the chill of the Void still clung to her skin, a reminder of the line she had crossed, and of the price she seemed willing to pay to end Sylvanas' trail of atrocities. Armed with Cotley's tip, Alleria and Turalyon charted a swift course to windswept Falder's Cove. Amid barnacled hulls and wary sailors, they cornered a smuggler whose dagger, its hilt etched with the Banshee Queen's sigil, reeked of forsaken allegiance. When the man refused to speak, Turalyon bound him in bands of radiant light, while Alleria's void-laced whispers rifled through his thoughts. The scene froze when Archmage Jaina Proudmoore arrived in a swirl of salt-tinged arcane light, dispatched by Anduin for an update. Turalyon pointed to the Forsaken Blade as proof the smuggler had sheltered Sylvanas' agent. Alleria added that her probing mind had learned the ranger was already sailing to Zandalar. Jaina departed to inform the king, an act Alleria privately deemed tattling. But Anduin, remembering the ashes of Teldrassil, reaffirmed his faith that the pair would hold the moral line. Days later, the duo accepted Jaina's reserved hospitality in Paralysis, while SI-7 scoured the Zandalari coast. The calm shattered when Flynn Fairwind burst in. Spymaster Matthias Shaw had been taken prisoner by the Empire. Alleria's thoughts leapt to the worst, Sylvanas weaving fresh alliances, sparking another clash with Jaina, who cautioned her against igniting war before diplomacy ran its course. Jaina vowed to wield the treaty itself as her first weapon, and only afterward the full might of Quel'Thalas, should the Horde test the Alliance's restraint. The abduction of King Anduin by the Mossworn thrust Turalyon into the mantle of Regent, and Alleria relocated her command to Stormwind's war room. transforming it into a hive of strategic recovery for the suddenly leaderless alliance. When Bolvar Foredragon summoned both faction commanders to Icecrown Citadel, Alleria stood beside her husband under the Frozen Throne's pale light, an uneasy tableau of Alliance, Horde, and Death's chosen guardian plotting a rescue that spanned life and afterlife. Beyond the veil, events spiraled toward an unexpected reckoning. Sylvanas Windrunner was forcibly reunited with the missing shard of her own soul, and when the jailer finally fell, a tribunal assembled in Oribos to weigh the Banshee Queen's crimes. Alleria and Verisa arrived in the Eternal City, their footsteps echoing through the ring of transference as they prepared to witness Tyrande Whisperwind's judgment. The sisters exchanged only a heartbeat of conversation with Sylvanas before Tyrande pronounced her sentence. She would descend into the maw and labor until every soul unjustly bound there walked free. Sylvanas accepted without protest. Her crimson gaze lingered on Alleria and Verisa before she stepped into the abyss. Afterward, the remaining Windrunners lingered on the platform's edge. So many branches of their family tree had been burned away that even this slender hope felt worth guarding. Perhaps, Alleria murmured, watching the swirling void below, penance can yet rewrite fate. Verisa nodded, fingers brushing the ruby pendant at her throat, the twin to Alleria's emerald. And together they turned back toward the portal home, planning for a future that might one day include all three sisters once more. As the radiant song echoed across Azeroth, Alleria Windrunner heard only the whisper of shadow emanating from the depths of Khazalgar. The dissonance troubled her deeply, prompting a difficult decision. She chose to distance herself from her family and seek answers alone. Boarding a griffin, she soared to Dalaran, making her way to the Violet Citadel, where she was met by Khadgar. Upon her arrival, Khadgar revealed his urgent need for her insight into the void. A mysterious figure known as a Harbinger had surfaced, wielding a powerful relic, the Dark Heart. Intrigued and determined, she vowed to return with the artifact in hand. With adventurers rallying by her side, she opened a gateway to the Telegrus Rift, seeking the aid of the Riftwalkers. There, she met with Umbric, who reported unsettling disturbances in the void across Azeroth. The Riftwalkers had returned from their investigations, save for one, Riftwalker Nelara, who had vanished in Northrend. Driven by urgency, Alleria and her allies set out for Ulduar, where Nelara was last seen. What they found was betrayal. Nelara had succumbed to the void, choosing allegiance to the darkness. As they prepared to confront her, the Harbinger revealed herself, addressing them as her honored guests. With chilling certainty, she issued a challenge. If they sought the Dark Heart, they would have to take it from her by force. Despite sensing the trap, Alleria knew the risk was necessary. She stepped through the void portal left in the Harbinger's wake, only to find herself in a place she never expected, Eridath. Memories of her past surged around her, twisted in a cruel display orchestrated by her unseen adversary. The realization struck her with force. The Harbinger either harbored a deep grievance against her, or had taken a keen interest in her fate. The final memory broke what little restraint Alleria held. Before her stood the twisted apparition of Turalyon, not as she knew him, but as a weapon wielded against her, eventually confronting the memory of Turalyon itself. Yet when the moment came to strike it down, she hesitated. The weight of love, duty, and regret rooted her in place. Locust Walker, however, harbored no such reservations. He eradicated the memory without hesitation.
So it is Xal'atath who has claimed the Dark Heart. I understand now why she calls herself the Harbinger.
I've had enough riddles for one day.
The radiant visions you spoke of are the very same my people had, before our world was consumed by the Void Lord Dimensius.
What? You don't think... Could Xal'atath be seeking that same fate for Azeroth?
I fear that is precisely what she intends. You must find a way to stop her.
Me? Look, she knew exactly how to hurt me. I don't think I'm the one to...
Yes, she knew your greatest fear is endangering your family. But you must let go of that fear. Embrace who you truly are.
I know who I am.
Do you? You are unbalanced. You must master your unique nature, Alleria. If you cannot, then Azeroth is already doomed.
It's best if I leave. I'm a danger to you all, so long as Xal'atath's gaze is cast upon me. Tell Khadgar what we learned. I will return to Dalaran in time.
Xal'atath has returned as the Harbinger. And now she has the power of the Dark Heart at her disposal.
It's all connected to the Radiant Song. It has to be.
Locust Walker said the Ethereals heard a similar song before Koresh was destroyed.
Then is Azeroth herself the one in danger? Is she speaking to us?
We need answers. We need her speaker.
I will seek out Magni. But first, I must inform Thrall of what we learned here. We must face this crisis together. Horde and Alliance both.
Before embarking on her hunt for Xal'atath, Alleria sought out Eretor, hoping to dissuade him from joining the battle. She wished for her son to live a life untouched by war, free from the burdens that had long weighed upon her. She had to go to Silvermoon City, where he had made his home, only to find an unexpected figure awaiting her at the gates, Lor'themar Theron. Their exchange was short, laden with unspoken history and mutual wariness. Lor'themar, ever the cautious leader, agreed to allow her entry, but only under strict guard. Alleria accepted the terms, though she had no intention of overstaying her welcome. As night descended, she slipped away into the city's heart, seeking her son's residence. Upon her arrival, another surprise awaited her. Turalyon was already there. His presence, though expected in some ways, sent a pang of unease through her. When he suggested joining her in her mission, she swiftly discouraged him. She had long since learned that the paths they walked were not the same. Setting the matter aside, she invited Eretor for an afternoon stroll, hoping for a rare moment of peace. As they walked, mother and son spoke of simple things, the shifting winds of Quel'Thalas, and the quiet joys of everyday life. Yet the weight of her true purpose loomed, and eventually she broached the topic. She pleaded with him to stay away from the coming conflict, to seek a path beyond war. But Eretor, ever like his mother, refused. To abandon his duty to turn his back on those in need, it was not a path he could take. Though disappointment flickered in her heart, Alleria respected his choice. For a fleeting moment, they stood on the precipice of understanding, each accepting the other's convictions. But as the last rays of daylight faded into dusk, reality pulled her back. The agreement with Lor'themar could not be ignored. Night had fallen. With a final glance at her son, Alleria turned away, the weight of their conversation settling upon her shoulders. Her path was set, and as she disappeared into the shadows of Silvermoon, she steeled herself for the hunt that awaited. Alleria's hunt eventually led her to Argus, where she sat by a flickering campfire, lost in the labyrinth of her thoughts. The choices that had shaped her path loomed heavy in her mind. She recalled the Second War, when she and Sylvanas had fought side by side to defend Quel'Thalas against the Orcish Horde. They had been inseparable then, sisters in arms, bound by duty and blood. But the growing conflict had torn them apart, sending them down very different paths in life and on death. Would she have still left Quel'Thalas had she known the fate that awaited Sylvanas? Would her sister have been spared the curse of undeath if Alleria had chosen differently? Her mind drifted further, to the moment she pledged herself to the Alliance of Lordaeron, where she had found love in Turalyon's unwavering faith. Together they had built a life, bringing Eretor into the world. But duty had called once more. She had left him behind in Varisa's care when she and Turalyon crossed the dark portal with the Alliance expedition. The memory was bittersweet, knowing now that the next time she would see her son, he would be grown. She could not help but wonder, would she have still gone if she had known the cost? Stripping away the remnants of her old ranger armor, she reflected on the sacrifices she had made. She had cast aside her past, her home, and even her own nature in pursuit of victory. She had come to believe the only way to defeat the darkness was to embrace it. Her thoughts turned to the moment she first wielded the void. She had used it to save Turallion from the Burning Legion, but he had been horrified by what she had become. Had she known it would drive him away, would she still have chosen this path? She donned her new armor, reforged in the shadows, and let go of the doubts gnawing at her soul. Everything she had done, every sacrifice she had made, had been for a reason. There was no turning back. With unwavering resolve, she struck a void-scarred encampment, cutting down her foes with precision and fury. In the stillness that followed, she reached her final conclusion. War was sacrifice. She had sacrificed everything to keep her loved ones safe. If it came down to offering herself to ensure Azeroth's survival, she would not hesitate. In time, Alleria returned to Dalaran, arriving just as Magni Bronzebeard met with the Council of Six. She stood among the gathered leaders when they proposed an audacious plan to teleport the city to Khaz-Algar. The decision was made, the spell was cast, and in an instant, Dalaran was no longer where it had been. Yet something felt off. A whisper in the back of Alleria's mind warned her of unseen dangers. Following her instinct, she set out to find Khadgar. As she made her way through the streets of Dalaran, she encountered Drendon, an old acquaintance, or so she thought. The illusion shattered as he cast off his disguise, revealing himself to be none other than Xal'atath, wearing the form of the long-dead Archmage. Before Alleria could react, the city erupted into chaos. Across Dalaran, portals tore open in the sky as the Nerubians of Azj-Kahet swarmed through, their chittering voices heralding an invasion. Wasting no time, Alleria took command, rallying adventurers to evacuate civilians to Krasus' landing, where Archmage Cylindra worked frantically to teleport them to safety. The battle raged on, and as they pushed deeper into the besieged city, a sudden collapse of debris separated Alleria from her allies. Trapped, she gave a single order: find Khadgar. At the heart of Dalaran, Xal'atath had already reached the Violet Citadel. There, she began siphoning the tower's arcane power, feeding it into the Dark Heart. Khadgar arrived, determined to stop her, but his spells were useless, absorbed effortlessly into the void. A series of dark orbs struck him, sending him to his knees as the Harbinger loomed over him, victory within her grasp. Then a shot rang out. Alleria had arrived, her arrows slicing through the air towards Xal'atath. But the Void Wielder was faster. Before she could loose another, a wave of psychic agony crashed into Alleria's mind, forcing her to her knees. The world blurred, her strength failing her, as Xal'atath's laughter echoed in the darkness. With the last of his power, Khadgar cast a final spell, not at Xal'atath, but at Alleria. In an instant she was gone, teleported to the Isle of Dorn. Disoriented, she struggled to her feet just in time to witness the unthinkable. From the distant shore, she watched as Xal'atath unleashed devastation upon Dalaran, obliterating the city in an explosion of arcane and void energy. Khadgar was nowhere to be seen, gone just like that. As the survivors regrouped in Dornegal, grief and guilt weighed heavily on Alleria's soul. While Thrall and Jaina left to rally the Horde and Alliance, she made a different choice. Protecting others had always been her purpose, yet time and again, those she sought to save had perished. Xal'atath remained free, more powerful than ever. And so, with a heavy heart, Alleria set forth once more, vowing to hunt down the Harbinger alone. Her hunt led her to the Proscenium, where the Nerubians struck again. In the chaos of battle, she fought fiercely, cutting through their ranks, but Queensguard Xerix burrowed away before she could finish him. Determined, she tracked him back to a burrow near Cinderbrew Meadery. With the city still vulnerable, they devised a strategy to draw the Nerubians away from Dornegal and into a trap at the Meadery. Baelgrim prepared Cinderbrew explosives, while Wenbrand ensured the safety of his workers. Once all was in place, Alleria lured the enemy into the ambush. As Xerix and his forces surged forward, the explosives were detonated, reducing the invading Nerubians to smoldering remnants. The battle was won, but not without cost. Baelgrim had sacrificed himself to ensure victory, and the Meadery was left in ruins. Despite their triumph, Alleria remained uneasy. Xal'atath was still out there, and she knew this moment of reprieve was fleeting at best. As she steeled herself for what was to come, Anduin approached, offering his gratitude for her role in defeating Xerix.
Valeria, I heard you helped corner Xerix at the meadery. Thank you.
The Nerubians took so much from us. I will not let them do the same to the Earthen.
They've been good allies, and gracious hosts.
A welcome surprise, given that they've been living in isolation for thousands of years.
That may not entirely be the case. I asked about why they keep calling me Arathi, and apparently an Arathi armada arrived on Khazalgar a number of years ago. They're said to have formed a settlement in the caverns beneath the island. It sounds impossible, but if it's true, I want to see it for myself. They could prove to be allies in our fight against Xalatath.
No. We've secured a measure of safety here. Don't abandon it to chase shadows in the dark.
Isn't that what you're doing?
I'm doing what I must. Hunting down every last Nerubian, following their trail back to Xalatath, and claiming vengeance for our dead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to...
Remain in Dornogal, Anduin. Leave the shadows to me.
Her hunt eventually led her to Hollowfall, where she tracked down Siege Lord Zarash. After slaying the Nerubian, she found Anduin once more, chastising him for disobeying her orders to stay in Dornogal. Frustration simmered beneath her words, and there was no time for further argument. They regrouped with Chiron and Faerun Lothar.
What is happening?
It's Beladar, our star. It shifts between the light and this. The Dawn Towers hold back the darkness with the sacred flame, but the light always returns.
The stars are devoured, and they light a candle. You know how this ends, Alleria. Inevitably, the void consumes everything.
Show yourself, monster!
You know where to find me. Deeper in the darkness.
A sense of foreboding gripped her, and without hesitation, she moved ahead to scout the way forward. Later, Aelric Lead and the Order of the Night launched their own assault, seizing control of the Dawn Tower and corrupting its sacred flame with shadow. Alleria struck swiftly, cutting down the cultists with ruthless efficiency, demanding answers. But Aelric, like a specter in the dark, escaped before she could force the truth from him. Undeterred, she aided Anduin and Faerun in uncovering the Order's plans, tracking them to a nearby hideout. Their search was soon interrupted as monstrous shadow creatures descended upon them. While Anduin and Faerun pressed forward, delving deeper into the cult's lair, Alleria stood her ground against the horrors of the void. When they emerged, their escape was blocked by one of Xalatath's illusions, a veil of deception meant to hinder their progress. But Alleria would not be so easily deceived. With a surge of void energy, she shattered the illusion, clearing their path back to the surface. As they ascended, the balance shifted. Beladar's glow returned, pushing back against the creeping darkness. Victory was momentary, fragile, but it was victory nonetheless. While Faerun and Anduin worked to purify the Dawn Tower's flame, Alleria remained outside, her gaze lingering on the horizon. She knew the battle was far from over. The Harbinger still waited in the shadows, and she would not rest until Xalatath was hunted down once and for all. With the Dawn Tower cleansed, Alleria and her allies returned to Moreldar to deliver a dire warning to General Steelstrike about the Order of Knight's growing threat. With the message delivered, they found themselves granted a rare moment of respite. Seeking a brief escape from the constant weight of war, they ventured to a nearby inn. Alleria remained on edge at first, cautious of those around her, but as the night wore on, she allowed herself to relax. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she drank with her companions, sharing in fleeting camaraderie before the storm resumed. But the moment could not last. Once the drinks were finished, duty called once more. Alleria sent an adventurer to gather propaganda from the Order and deliver it to Steelstrike, while she pulled Anduin aside.
I wish you had heeded my warning and stayed in Dornegal. She is here, Anduin. The Arathi are in danger. We are in danger.
I needed to see if there were really descendants of the Arathi down here. I'm the King of Stormwind. So many human kingdoms have fallen. I needed to know if there were others.
It was still a foolish risk.
You're not the only one grappling with the voices in their head.
What have you been hearing?
Beladar, the Emperor's vision. That prophecy that drew them here. It's the radiant song I'm hearing.
You have been hearing the star?
Yes. No, not really. When I saw Beladar for the first time, I had the vision again. It's related somehow. I wish Khadgar were here. He'd know what it all meant. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to...
No. You're right. I wish he was here as well. We'll have to find our own answers.
I've gotten a look at the crystals and their keyflames. It's not Azerite, but it's close enough that I think they're connected.
Then you've realized when Beladar shifted for the first time?
Their day of darkness. The same day Sargeras plunged that sword into Azeroth.
With little time to dwell on the gravity of this knowledge, she turned her attention to Steelstrike, debriefing the general on all she knew about Xal'atath. But before they could plan their next move, the alarm was raised. A Cobus attack was underway at the Veneration grounds. Alleria and her allies rushed to the site, finding Aelric Lead at the center of the conflict. He was conducting a ritual, attempting to corrupt the Eternal Flame, his dark magic reinforced by the presence of Cobus warriors. With swift precision, they cut down the creatures, fueling his power, weakening his defenses. With one final strike, Alleria shattered the barrier shielding Aelric, allowing the adventurer to land the killing blow.
Alleria, what happened?
For years I've held back the void within me, worried I'd hurt my loved ones. When Dalaran fell, I didn't draw on my power, and someone dear to me paid the price. Like Alric, Xal'atath thinks herself safe behind layers of shadow. She isn't. Not when I can turn their own power against her. I will do all it takes to end her threat for good.
Victory was short-lived. As they secured the Veneration grounds, another distress call reached them, this time from Livia's patients. By the time they arrived, it was too late. The town had already fallen, consumed by the relentless tide of Nerubians. Steelstrike wasted no time in giving orders. Alleria and the others were to hold off the advancing swarm while she readied the reckoning for departure. As the survivors boarded the airship, the battle reached a fever pitch. Just as they prepared to take off, Anduin spotted a void-infused ballista aimed at them. Without hesitation, he leapt from the deck, striking down the siege weapons before it could fire. But the heroism came at a cost. Before he could escape, the Nerubians swarmed him, dragging him beneath their ranks. Determined not to leave him behind, Alleria and Farron unleashed the Reckoning's full arsenal, pushing back the enemy forces in a desperate bid to reach Anduin. But fate had other plans. As they ascended, an unseen threat struck the ship. The Reckoning trembled, spiraling down into the Whispering Chasm. They survived the crash, though not without aid. A mysterious woman had intervened, though her identity remained shrouded in secrecy. As the dust settled, Alleria wasted no time in searching for any sign of Anduin. Tracks in the dirt led south, proof that he had survived. Despite Farron's protests, she made her decision. She would find him, no matter what it took. Later, Alleria received an unexpected invitation from Anduin, requesting her presence in the City of Threads. Upon arriving, she found him engaged in conversation with Executor Nizrik. Instinctively, she drew her bow, aiming directly at the Nerubian. But before she could loose her arrow, Anduin intervened, his voice steady as he urged her to stand down. He explained his reasoning, hoping that in sacrificing himself the light would return to him. It had not. Yet despite that, Nizrik had taken an interest in his resolve, and had diverted his prison transport. Anduin, though still unable to wield the light, was determined to help others in the way he knew best. While Alleria remained distrustful of the Nerubians, she trusted him. Nizrik then revealed the true purpose of their meeting. It was Ascendance Day, a new holiday ordained by Queen Ensarek to glorify their void-infused evolution. Across the city, shadecasters filled the streets with messages of ascension. To combat this, Nizrik provided them with a device that would overwrite their propaganda and reveal the truth about the so-called ascendants. After sabotaging the shadecasters' messages, Alleria, Anduin, and an adventurer moved to observe Ansarek's speech, while Nizrik prepared their escape route. Standing amid the crowd, Alleria felt the familiar pull of the void around the Queen. It did not take long for her to reach a conclusion. Ansarek was yet another pawn of Xal'atath. As they turned to leave, an icy dread settled over her. The Harbinger was near. Then she saw her, standing beside the Queen, her presence as suffocating as ever. Without hesitation, Alleria nocked an arrow and fired at Xal'atath. Anduin shouted in protest, but the shot had already been released. Xal'atath did not so much as flinch. With a flicker of movement, she dodged effortlessly. The arrow embedded itself into the ground before Ansarek. Enraged, the Queen declared them assassins and ordered their capture. They had no choice but to flee. As they raced through the city, Anduin demanded to know what she had been thinking. Her answer was simple: she had to take the shot. For Dalaran, for Khadgar, for everyone lost to Xal'atath's machinations. But there was no time for debate. They reached the flyers Nizrik had prepared for their escape, only to find their path blocked. KX, Fang of the Queen, intercepted them, slaying their flyers before they could board. Forced into battle, they fought fiercely, ultimately defeating the Fang. But it was too late. The Nerubians closed in around them, cutting off all escape routes. Alleria made the call. There was only one way out. She ordered Anduin and the adventurer to jump from the waterfall. They hesitated, but there was no other choice. One by one, they leapt into the depths below. Then Xal'atath appeared. She did not attack. She did not need to. Instead, she taunted Alleria, weaving her words like poison. She spoke of how Alleria always pushed away those closest to her. The Harbinger urged her to embrace her true nature, to give in to the darkness fully, to sever all ties to those she once loved. For a moment, the weight of her words pressed down upon Alleria like a suffocating fog. Then she made her choice. She struck Xal'atath with a decisive punch, silencing her taunts, and leapt from the waterfall, reuniting with Anduin and the adventurer below. As she gathered herself, Anduin asked her what Xal'atath truly wanted from her. She took a steady breath, the clarity settling over her. The Harbinger wanted her to forsake everything, to surrender to the void entirely. But in that moment, Alleria realized she didn't have to choose between the void and her family. She could walk both paths. She would walk both paths. Upon returning to the Weaver's lair, they informed Widow Arachni of all that had transpired. A decision was made. Arachni, Anu Bazal, and Nizrik forged an alliance, forming the Severed Threads. With new allies at their side, they returned to the surface to debrief their forces. Upon returning to Dornegal, Alleria came to a sobering realization.
My grief and rage were deafening. I thought the only way to silence them
was to hunt down those responsible. I know what that's like. To survive an atrocity and feel like vengeance is all you have left.
Or to think you could have stopped what happened, if you had just seen what was right in front of you.
That pain, that guilt. I felt it twisting me into someone I'm not. But I assure you, I have found my way back from the edge. And I am here, with you, to the end.
It's good to have you with us, Alleria.
We're all in this together.
That we are. The time will come when I must face Xal'atath again. But when I do, it will be for the right reasons.
Her moment of reflection was soon interrupted by Moira Therasan, who arrived with urgent news. Thrall and Jaina had returned, bringing with them the combined forces of the Horde and the Alliance. The armies of Azeroth had answered the call. Not long after, she reunited with Turalyon.
Alleria, when I heard about Dalaran, I would have come sooner. I wanted to. But the state of the world right now, the Radiant Song...
It's all right, Turalyon. You don't... We each have our responsibilities to bear. Truth be told, if you had seen me as I was, what I had started to become...
I should have been there for you.
You were. More than you could ever know.
We stood together for 1,000 years. I'll stand by you for 1,000 more.
And the next time I push you away?
I wait. Until you ask me to come back.
And it's a good thing I always do.
I've missed you, Alleria. And I'm not going anywhere.
I know. We stand together, Turalyon. Here and now.
As the Horde and Alliance began training the Earthen for battle, Alleria saw the need for more. She tasked her adventurers with restoring the legendary Storm Riders. Their efforts bore fruit when Lucilla successfully brought back the Stormrook and formed a new Storm Rider order. Alleria stood alongside her allies as the Earthen cast aside their ancient edicts and officially pledged themselves to the war against Xal'atath and the Nerubians of Azj-Kahet. However, their defiance awakened an old force. A dormant Titan construct reactivated, seeking to punish the Earthen for abandoning their sacred edicts. The newly formed Storm Riders, in their first true test of battle, rode into the fray and shattered the construct. When they returned to Dornegal, victorious and hardened by battle, Alleria watched them with quiet pride. They had proven themselves in fire and steel, and now they stood ready for the war to come. Widow Arachni arrived with urgent news, delivering a message to Alleria. She had uncovered a new lead that could be vital in their cause. Having learned from her last expedition to Azj-Kahet, which ended with mixed results, Alleria chose to send Lily and Voss and an adventurer in her stead. When they returned, Voss reported troubling findings. Ansarek's forces were transporting black blood into Hollowfall, and worse, Xal'atath possessed the ability to seize control of any ascended Nerubian at will. Taking swift action, Alleria entrusted a missive to the adventurer from High Speaker Brenth, who sought to contribute to the war effort by restoring an ancient golem manufacturing facility within the Ringing Deeps. When the facility was successfully brought back online, Alleria was pleased, recognizing that these constructs could rival the power of Ansarek's Ascended. But Xal'atath did not wait idly. As Beledar shifted towards Shadow, she launched an all-out assault on the Arathi. Alleria and her forces rushed to Hollowfall to reinforce General Steelstrike's embattled troops. The battle raged, but as the clash intensified, an unease settled over Alleria. Something wasn't right. Then she remembered Khadgar's final words. This isn't the real fight. Trusting her instincts, she channeled her powers to pierce the veil of reality, and tapped into the unseeming. Through the rippling shadows, she saw the truth. The black blood was not simply a weapon. It was being moved toward the priory of the Sacred Flame. Xal'atath's true goal had never been Hollowfall. It had been the priory all along. Wasting no time, she turned to Turalyon, informing him that she knew where the Harbinger was. He insisted they face Xal'atath together, but Alleria shook her head. He needed to stay behind and win this battle. She would deal with Xal'atath. Gathering Anduin, Farron, and an adventurer, they took the Dawnbreaker and set their course for the Priory. Upon arrival, they found the once holy grounds consumed by darkness. The Priory was wreathed in shadow, its flame barely holding back the corruption. To push forward, they lit the ancient braziers, forcing back the encroaching void. As they advanced, their path was barred by Queen Neferis, the Broken Queen, a once proud ruler now ensnared by Xal'atath's influence. They clashed in a vicious battle, but as the fight wore on, it became clear that Neferis was resisting the Harbinger's hold. Rather than slay her, they subdued her, freeing her from Xal'atath's grip. With the way clear, Farron remained outside to hold off the enemy, while Alleria and her allies pressed into the depths of the Priory. There they found Xal'atath, standing before the Dark Heart, weaving Beladar's essence into its corrupted power. She greeted them with a knowing smile, her voice laced with amusement as she spoke of mortals, of their insatiable hunger for violence, their endless cycle of destruction. She had watched them across the ages, fascinated by the wrath they so often unleashed in the name of justice. Then, the realization struck Alleria. Xal'atath had lured them all to Khazalgar, not just for chaos, but to fuel the Black Blood itself. This was all part of her grand design, but Alleria would not allow it to unfold. Raising her bow, she took aim. Xal'atath chuckled, unfazed. "You cannot kill me," she mused. Alleria smirked. "I wasn't aiming at you." She released the arrow, sending it hurtling toward the Dark Heart. Xal'atath's mirth faded as she lunged to intercept it, but she was too late. The arrow struck true, cracking the artifact's surface, causing its immense power to leak out uncontrollably. Furious, Xal'atath seethed, declaring that Alleria had changed nothing. Then in a whirl of void energy, she vanished. But as the shadows of her departure faded, something else emerged. An injured raven, battered and weak, flew through the dying portal. And before their eyes, the bird twisted and morphed, shifting into the form of Khadgar. Alleria barely had time to react before his body collapsed. She ran to him, but his form was already fading. Slipping beyond the reach of the living, desperation clawed at her. But before she could lose him once more, Anduin stepped forward. As Beladar's light returned, the golden radiance surged through him, and for the first time in too long, he felt the light answer his call. With its healing touch, he reached for Khadgar, and this time, the old mage did not slip away. The battle was far from over, but hope, fragile as it was, had not been lost yet. Outside, they reunited with their allies, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Alleria allowed herself to savor the victory. Xal'atath had been dealt a blow, and though she would undoubtedly return, they had earned a moment of respite. The battle had not been in vain. Later, in the halls of Foundation Hall in Dornegal, Alleria and Khadgar sat together, finally able to speak without the weight of war pressing down on them. Khadgar revealed the truth of his survival, how he had transmuted himself into pure arcane energy, allowing himself to be drawn into the Dark Heart. He had placed his faith in Alleria, just as he had when they charged through the Dark Portal all those years ago. He had known she would find a way to free him. But the spell had come at a cost. The ordeal had left him weakened, and now he was bound to a wheelchair, a masterfully crafted gift by Archmage Modera. Alleria, never one to miss an opportunity, couldn't help but tease him about whether he harbored feelings for the mage. Khadgar merely chuckled, shaking his head at her antics. Despite the victory, a dark presence still lingered beneath Hollowfall, gnawing at the edge of Alleria's senses. Unwilling to ignore the threat, she sent an adventurer to investigate. When they returned, accompanied by Monty Gaslow, the news was worse than she expected. Jaster Gallywix had resurfaced, drilling deep within the ringing deeps for something unknown. But they had not faced this revelation alone. They had been aided by Orwena, a mystic who had defied Herener tradition and revealed herself, guided by visions she could not ignore. Alleria regarded the newcomer with interest and gratitude, thanking her for intervening when the reckoning crashed. If Orwena's visions were tied to Azeroth herself, then they could not be ignored. Without hesitation, she directed her to Magni Bronzebeard, believing that whatever truths lie ahead, the speaker would be the one to decipher them.
Well, best be setting sail to Ironforge. No sense in dawdling.
Are you sure about staying Dagran? You could return home with us and study there.
I'm sure, Ma. There's still so much knowledge here, yet to be discovered.
And knowing you, you'll find it all. Keep out of trouble. And make sure Brinth always knows where you are.
Yes, Mum.
Ah, and who is this?
I am called Orwena. I've been told you too have heard the voice of the goddess.
Goddess? You mean Azeroth? Aye, I was her speaker for many years, but she's let me go from that service.
Her voice has led me far from my home, seeking a truth I know she wishes to reveal. But my kin, they do not understand.
Aye, it can be lonely following a path that others can't see. But don't make the same mistake I did, putting it all on yourself. Look for those who will walk the path with you. If I've learned anything, it's that we'll always need each other to not lose ourselves on the journey.
You are kind, Magni. I will consider your words carefully.
Best of luck to you, Orwena. One day, when you found what you're looking for, I hope you too find your way home.
In the wake of battle and uncertainty, Alleria and the Sons of Lothar finally gathered for their long-awaited reunion, choosing to celebrate the Feast of Wintervale in their hidden sanctuary, a place beyond Xal'atath's reach. For one night, war and shadow were set aside in favor of camaraderie and remembrance. Among the attendees was the Orc Eitrig, who had recently begun working with Daneth Trollbane to ease tensions in the Arathi Highlands. His presence was a testament to how much the world had changed since the wars of old. Upon Alleria's arrival, Turallion greeted her warmly, conveying Erator's regards and asking if she would spend the night with him after the feast. A rare, genuine smile touched her lips as she agreed. As the celebration carried on, laughter and old stories filled the air, rekindling the bonds forged through hardship and sacrifice. Yet even in this moment of peace, Alleria's thoughts lingered on the war still unfinished. Xal'atath had been stopped, but not destroyed. The Harbinger would return. It was only a matter of time. Sensing the weight on her mind, her friends rallied around her, offering warmth and reassurance. For tonight at least, they reminded her that victory was not only measured in battles won, but in the moments of joy shared between them. And for the first time in what felt like ages, Alleria allowed herself simply to be, to laugh, to reminisce, and to hold on to the light, however fleeting, in the company of those she trusted most. Having received word from Orwena about the presence of Blackblood and Ethereals in Undermine, Alleria wasted no time in making her way to the city. Upon arrival, she was halted by customs agents, their obstruction little more than a nuisance. With the swift intervention of Azeroth's champions, they were dealt with, clearing the path forward. Joined by Gazlo, Renzik the Shiv, and the champions, Alleria ventured deeper into the city, seeking out Marin Noggenfogger at the Vat Works. The area was crawling with the Dark Fuse enforcement, but with a well-placed distraction, they managed to evade their patrols. Marin revealed that answers lay within Venture's Khajiit mines, an opportunity too important to ignore. While the others pressed forward, Alleria chose to remain behind, ensuring Marin's safety before rejoining the fight. Before long, chaos erupted as the Steamwheel laboratories came under siege. Ethereal, seemingly under the command of Phase Thief Azir, launched their attack. Fighting alongside the champion, Alleria cut through the invaders, destroying the phase resonances they had established. The devices had been meant to summon reinforcements and communicate with their commanders. But as the last one shattered, a grim realization struck her. The Ethereals had already found what they were looking for. The Dark Heart was an Undermine. Regrouping with Marin, she learned that Gallywix had taken hostages, including Marin's wife, and was holed up where the Dark Heart resided. Before they could act, Phase Thief Azir made his move, boldly declaring that the Ethereals would soon claim their prize. As Alleria set off in pursuit of Azir, Gazlo, Renzik, and the champions rushed to free the captives. Despite her relentless pursuit, Azir remained one step ahead. Before she could stop him, he seized the Dark Heart from Gallywix's grasp and vanished into the shadows. The artifact had slipped through her fingers, but the chase was far from over. Determined not to let the Ethereals wield such power unchecked, Alleria set out once more, vowing to track them down, no matter the cost. And that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully you did enjoy. Thanks for checking it out. and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Do take care of yourself.